The moment I walked through the door, I could feel it. The tension. The air was thick, buzzing with excitement, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. But beneath all of it, something felt off. Maybe it was just me, or maybe it was something else. There was a strange sense of anticipation hanging in the air, like the calm before a storm. And that storm, it was about to hit. I tried to shake off the unease as I stepped deeper into the room. I should have been excited, and this was supposed to be a celebration. I had been working hard, juggling everything in my personal life, work, and just trying to keep everything from falling apart. But tonight, something felt wrong. Something was off about her. Her name was Lisa. We'd been together for over 5 years. Everything was fine, or so I thought. Yeah, that's the thing about betrayal. It creeps up on you when you least expect it. It's subtle, sneaky, a slow burn until it consumes you. But right now at this party, I wasn't thinking about Lisa. I wasn't thinking about our marriage, not yet. I wasn't even thinking about the strange chill that seemed to surround her tonight. My focus was on my colleague, Richard. I had always known there was something about him, something about the way he looked at Lisa, the way he spoke to her. But I never thought much of it, until now. Richard was one of those guys who always seemed to have everything figured out. He had the confidence, the charm, and he used it all. Always knew the right things to say, the right way to smile. His presence was magnetic, and for some reason, Lisa seemed drawn to him. That's how it always looked to me. Anyway, tonight, however, he was different. Something in the way he approached me, the way he kept glancing at Lisa, and then back at me. I felt a wave of unease wash over me. My instincts kicked in. There was something more to this, something that wasn't sitting right with me. As I made my way to the bar, I tried to brush off the feeling, but it clung to me, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I forced myself to focus on the crowd, the music, the laughter, the sound of a celebration. But I couldn't shake the image of Richard standing across the room, his eyes locked on Lisa. The way he moved closer to her every chance he got. Something about the way they interacted was too familiar, too comfortable. They were speaking in hushed tones, their heads close together, sharing a laugh, but it wasn't just a laugh. Now it felt like they were sharing something deeper, something I wasn't a part of. And that's when it hit me. Was this all in my head? Or had something already happened? Had Lisa betrayed me? Had Richard been the one? The seconds felt like hours as I stood frozen watching them. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. The doubt crept in, gnawing at me, making me question everything. Everything that had been so perfect before. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I felt paralyzed by the thought, by the possibility that everything I had believed in was built on a lie. I wanted to go up to them, to ask Lisa what was going on, but I couldn't. I didn't have the words. What could I possibly say? Are you cheating on me? It sounded insane, even in my head. But then again, wasn't this how it always went? Didn't people always say they saw the signs too late? Didn't they always ignore the little details until it was too late? I glanced over to the corner of the room where my other colleagues were gathered. The laughter, the conversations, they felt distant now, like I was on the outside looking in. I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone else knew something I didn't. The worst part? I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending everything was fine. I wasn't going to stand there and let it consume me, though. I had to know. I had to find out what was going on. So, I pushed through the crowd, my heart racing faster with every step. My hands felt clammy, my breath shallow, my mind 1,000 miles away, already rehearsing what I was going to say. And then, as I got closer, Lisa turned. Our eyes met. She smiled. No, but it wasn't the same smile. It wasn't the smile I knew. It was forced, thin, as if she were hiding something, something I wasn't supposed to see. "Hey, babe," she said, but there was an edge to her voice now, a tension that hadn't been there before. "Having a good time?" I nodded, but I could feel my face flush. I couldn't help it. I was nervous. My instincts were screaming at me. The smile didn't reach her eyes, and when she shifted her gaze behind me to where Richard stood, that's when it hit me. She was hiding something. She wasn't just being distant. No, this was something else. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say anything, Richard appeared behind me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a friendly gesture, but it felt anything but friendly. It felt like a warning. Hey, a man, Richard said with that same cool, collected smile. How's it going? His voice was smooth, calculated. I felt my muscles tense. My body reacted before my mind could even process what was happening. This wasn't just a casual greeting. This was something more. This was Richard claiming territory, marking his ground. I'm good, I replied, my voice tight. Just enjoying the party. I tried to keep it casual, but the words felt hollow. I could see Lisa standing beside him, her posture stiff now, like she was bracing herself for something. What was she afraid of? Was it me? Or was it Richard? Richard chuckled. You're a tough guy to get a hold of. Always busy, huh? He leaned in a little closer, and I felt the air between us shift. I could feel the challenge in his words, the underlying tension. This wasn't just small talk. No. Hey, he was testing me, pushing my buttons. But why? What was he trying to prove? I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened, and for a split second I thought I might choke. But then, just as quickly, the truth hit me. This was it. This was the moment. Richard was the one who had been trying to intimidate me. But he had no idea what was coming. Little did he know, I wasn't the one he should be worried about. The party carried on, the music pulsing in the background, people laughing, dancing, and clinking glasses. But all I could hear was the tight, unsettling silence between Richard, Lisa, and me. I could feel the weight of his hand on my shoulder, the tension building with every passing second. Lisa stood there, her hands clasped in front of her, avoiding my gaze. It wasn't like her. She had always been the confident one, the one who would stand by me no matter what. But tonight? Tonight she seemed distant, as if she were already a million miles away. Richard's smile remained fixed, but there was something behind his eyes, something I couldn't place. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying watching me squirm. He was testing me, pushing my limits. But why? I had to know. And I was going to find out. No matter what it took. Richard, I said, my voice low and controlled, do you mind if I have a word with my wife for a second? His smile never wavered. It was like he was enjoying this, the little game he was playing. Of course, man. Take all the time you need, he said, his voice smooth as butter. But there was a glint in his eyes, like he knew something I didn't. I gave him a tight smile, trying to mask the fury building up inside me. Thanks, I muttered, before turning toward Lisa. She didn't meet my gaze. She was looking anywhere but at me. I could see the way her eyes flickered nervously, the way she tugged at the hem of her dress, as if she were trying to distract herself from the inevitable. She knew what was coming. Lisa, I said, my voice sharp, what's going on? Tell me the truth. Her eyes snapped up to meet mine, and for a brief moment, I saw it. The guilt. It flashed across her face, quickly hidden behind a mask of indifference. What do you mean? She replied, her voice shaking just slightly. I took a deep breath, trying to control the anger and the hurt bubbling up inside me. I saw the way you were talking to Richard, the way you two were too comfortable with each other. Yeah, too familiar. What's going on? Her lips parted as if she were about to say something, but then she closed them again. She glanced over my shoulder at Richard, who was still standing there watching us. I could feel his eyes on me, like a predator eyeing its prey. I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Tell me, Lisa, were you sleeping with him? Her body stiffened, and I could feel the tension radiating off her. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she bit her lip, her eyes darting to the floor. No, she whispered finally. But the way she said it, the hesitation in her voice, I knew it wasn't the whole truth. I shook my head, feeling a cold pit form in my stomach. Don't lie to me, Lisa. I know something's going on. I can feel it. I've been watching the way you two act around each other. Yeah, the way he touches you. You're not fooling anyone. Her eyes filled with tears now, but she quickly wiped them away, refusing to let me see her weakness. I'm not lying, she insisted, her voice cracking. But Richard and I, we've been getting close. We're just friends, okay? Nothing more than that. Friends. The word hung in the air, like a thick, suffocating cloud. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I couldn't. Not after everything I had seen tonight. Before I could respond, Richard appeared at my side again, his smile ever present, but there was something darker behind it now. Is everything okay here? He asked, his voice dripping with false concern. I turned to face him, feeling the anger and resentment boiling over. Why don't you tell me, Richard? I snapped. How long have you been sleeping with my wife? He didn't flinch. In fact, he seemed amused. Whoa, calm down, man. There's no need to get all worked up. Lisa and I are just good friends, right? His eyes flickered to her for a brief second, but the moment was enough. I looked back at Lisa. She was trembling now, her hands pressed tightly against her sides. She couldn't look me in the eye anymore. She was hiding something, something that was eating away at her, and I was finally seeing it for the first time. I took a step toward Richard, my jaw clenched, my fists balling at my sides. You don't get to play the nice guy here, I growled. You've been playing me, playing both of us. You've been lying to my face while I was out there busting my ass for this family, for this marriage. And you're out here, playing games with my wife. Richard's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. You're overreacting, he said, his voice lower now. We're just two people having a good time at a party. You need to chill, man. Chill. That word was the last straw. It was the one thing that made me snap. Before I knew it, I was shoving Richard, sending him stumbling back a few steps. The partygoers around us gasped, their attention snapping to us instantly. I didn't care. My entire world had just crumbled in front of me, and I wasn't about to let Richard sit there and pretend he hadn't been playing me the whole time. Don't you dare talk to me like that, I said, my voice seething with anger. You're the one who's been playing games. You've been lying to me, lying to her, and I'm done. Lisa tried to step forward, but I held up my hand, I stopping her in her tracks. No, I said, the word more final than anything I had ever said in my life. Don't try to defend him. Not anymore. Richard didn't respond right away. He just stood there glaring at me, his jaw clenched. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, the music and the chatter around us fading away into the background. And then, finally, he spoke. You don't know the full story, he said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. You think you do, but you don't. I frowned, my heart pounding in my chest. What are you talking about? He looked at Lisa, his gaze lingering for a second longer than it should have. You really think she's been faithful to you? You think she hasn't been seeing someone else? I froze. What did he just say? Lisa was trembling now, her face pale, her lips quivering. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. It was like the room had gone silent, the entire world narrowing down to this one moment. I know everything, man, Richard continued, his voice low but filled with a dangerous edge. You've been living in the dark, but I'm not the one who needs to explain myself. She does. And with that, the truth hit me harder than anything I had ever felt before. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Richard's words echoed in my ears, and I couldn't get them out of my head. You think she's been faithful to you? The question hung in the air like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over everything. I turned back to Lisa, who was now visibly shaking. Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling as she pressed them to her sides. She wasn't saying anything, just standing there, now frozen like a deer in the headlights. The truth was there. I could see it in her face. I didn't need her to say anything. I could feel it. I stepped closer to her, my voice low but firm, filled with a mixture of hurt and anger that I couldn't quite control. Is it true, Lisa? I asked, my voice tight, barely able to keep the emotion in check. Tell me, are you cheating on me? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence between us felt like a suffocating weight. The entire room, the party, the people laughing, the music, all of it seemed so distant now, so irrelevant. It was just her and me, and the truth was finally staring me in the face. Richard was still standing there, watching us, a smug look on his face as if he knew something I didn't. It was like he had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to crack, for the truth to finally come out. He wasn't just playing a game anymore, this was something else. Lisa finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I never meant for it to happen like this, she started, but I couldn't listen to her excuses. Not now. Not after everything. You didn't mean for it to happen? I interrupted, my voice rising. What do you mean by that? Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I wouldn't see the way you and Richard were acting around each other? I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the anger boiling over, but it wasn't just anger. It was betrayal, pain, a feeling that I couldn't even put into words. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking as she finally looked me in the eyes. But it wasn't the kind of apology that would fix anything. It wasn't the kind of apology that made it all better. It was empty, hollow. Richard didn't back off. He stepped forward, his face more serious now, but there was still that glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. You don't know the full story, he said again, his voice low and deliberate. Lisa's been hiding more than just a friendship. She's been hiding a lot more. I looked at him, confused. What are you talking about? I demanded, my heart pounding harder now. But before he could answer, Lisa finally spoke again, her voice barely audible, like she was fighting to keep it together. I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant for you to find out like this. Then how, Lisa? I asked, my voice a mix of anger and disbelief. How did it happen? How did you get involved with him? Her eyes darted to the floor, as if she couldn't look me in the eye. It wasn't like that at first, she said quietly. I didn't want it to go this far. But Richard, he made me feel special. He listened to me. He made me feel like I mattered. She paused, her lips trembling. I've been feeling neglected for a while now, and he gave me attention. That's all it was at first. Attention. The words hit me like a slap to the face. I had been so wrapped up in work, in everything I had to do to keep things together, that I didn't even realize what was slipping through my fingers. I had failed her. You're telling me, I said, my voice cold now, that this was all because you didn't feel appreciated? Because I was busy? Is that it? She nodded, her face pale, guilt written all over it. Yes, she whispered. It started with a few lunches. A few conversations. I didn't think anything of it at first. But then it turned into something more. And by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. Richard crossed his arms over his chest, looking smug. She's telling the truth. I've been there for her when you weren't. She needed someone, and I gave her that. I never planned on it getting out of hand, but things just happened. I could feel my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. The man I trusted, the man who I thought was just a colleague, had been the one to betray me. He had crossed the line, and I had been too blind to see it. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How long has this been going on? Lisa looked down, unable to meet my eyes. A few months, she admitted, her voice trembling. It started as innocent conversations, and then one thing led to another. I felt the weight of her words crush me. A few months? That's how long she had been betraying me? All those late nights when she said she was working late, all those times when she told me she was with her friends, it had all been lies. She had been with him. I turned away from her, unable to look at her anymore. I didn't want to hear any more excuses. I didn't want to hear anything else about how it had just happened. The damage was done. Why, Richard? I asked, turning back to him, my anger now laser-focused on him. Why did you do this? Why betray me like this? Richard smirked. Why not? He replied, his tone casual, like it was all some game. I've always had an eye on Lisa. I've always known she was unhappy with you. I figured if you weren't giving her what she needed, someone else would, and guess what? I was right. I felt like I had been slapped across the face. This wasn't just some casual affair. No, Richard had been plotting this. He had been waiting for the moment when I would fail, when Lisa would become vulnerable enough for him to swoop in. But the thing was, I wasn't done yet. I wasn't just going to let this happen. I wasn't going to let him walk away thinking he had won. I turned to Lisa one last time, my voice firm. You can't undo this. You can't take back what's been done. But I need you to understand something. You broke us. You broke everything we built together. She started to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. No, I said, my voice steady now, despite the chaos inside me. This is over. Don't say anything else. Shh, we're done. The words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. It was done. The betrayal was out in the open. And now, I had to find a way to move forward. I turned to Richard, my eyes burning with fury. You think you've won, but you haven't, I said, my voice cold as ice. You may have had your fun, but you're not walking away from this without consequences. Richard didn't flinch. He just smiled like he had already won, but he hadn't. Not yet. I could feel my blood boiling as the seconds stretched into minutes. The room around me had gone quiet. It felt like the party, once filled with laughter and chatter, had evaporated into a sea of whispers and curious glances. Everyone was watching now, all eyes on the mess that had unfolded right in front of them. But I wasn't done yet. No, I couldn't let Richard or Lisa think they could just walk away from this. I had been the fool, the one who had trusted, the one who had given everything. And now they thought they could destroy everything with a few lies, a few stolen moments, and a lot of deceit. Not on my watch. I took a step toward Richard, my eyes locked onto his, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see a colleague, a friendly face. I saw a predator, a man who had preyed on my vulnerabilities, a man who had used my marriage as a stepping stone for his own selfish desires. You think you've got all the power here, don't you? I said, my voice low and controlled, though inside my rage was spiraling. You think you can waltz in and take what's mine, but you don't get to decide that. Richard's smile faltered for just a second, but it was enough. Enough to let me know he wasn't as invincible as he'd made himself out to be. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, sizing me up. But then, as if he'd been holding it back all night, his expression hardened, and the smirk returned. You don't get it, do you? He said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. This has nothing to do with you anymore. You were too busy playing the good husband while Lisa was out here, looking for something real. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Looking for something real? Was that what he thought? That I had been the one neglecting her? That I was the reason this had happened? You don't know anything about what's real, I spat, my teeth gritted. If you knew anything, you'd know what it means to fight for something. To want something, not just take it when it's convenient. Richard stepped closer, his face now only inches away from mine, his breath hot against my skin. I don't need to fight for anything, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I've got what I want, and that's all that matters. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to punch that smug look off his face and knock some sense into him. But I held myself back. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I knew I had to do this my way. I had to be the one who walked away from this, not him. I looked over at Lisa, who was standing there, still trembling, her face pale and full of guilt. She hadn't said anything in what felt like hours, and maybe that was the problem. Maybe I had been waiting for her to take accountability, to finally admit what had happened. But I realized something. Lisa wasn't going to save this marriage, not after everything. I turned back to Richard, shaking my head. You don't get to control this. You don't get to take her from me, from us, I said, my voice steadier now, more composed. You've crossed the line, Richard, and it's not just between you and me anymore. It's between all of us. His expression remained unchanged, but I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a crack in the armor he'd so carefully built around himself. For the first time, he seemed unsure, but before I could say anything else, Lisa spoke up, her voice shaking but louder now. Stop, she said, her tone soft but desperate. Please just stop. This isn't what I wanted. None of this was planned. I never meant to hurt you. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she wiped them away quickly. It just happened. I didn't know how to stop it. It wasn't about you. It was about me. I felt so alone. Her words hit me harder than anything Richard had said. There was so much truth in them, so much pain. But what hurt the most was the realization that she had let it go this far without even trying to save us. She had let herself slip away, let herself fall into Richard's arms, without ever thinking about the consequences. I had been so caught up in my own work, in keeping everything together, that I had missed the signs. I had missed her slipping away from me. I tried, I whispered, more to myself than to her. I tried to be everything you needed. But I guess it wasn't enough, was it? Lisa didn't answer right away. She just stood there, her body trembling as if the weight of everything was finally crashing down on her. I didn't mean to hurt you, she repeated, but her voice was weak. I never wanted to hurt you. I shook my head. Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come to me when things started falling apart? Why did you let it get this far? She opened her mouth as if to respond, but nothing came out. It was like the words had died in her throat, like she realized that nothing she could say would change what had already happened. Richard, still standing behind me, cleared his throat. You can talk all you want, but the truth is, none of it matters now. It's done. His words stung, but they weren't wrong. Everything had changed. Everything was done. My marriage, my trust, my belief in the people closest to me. It was all shattered in an instant, and I couldn't glue it back together. Not now. I'm not like this. I turned away from both of them, feeling the weight of the betrayal pulling me down. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that we could somehow fix this. No amount of apologies, no amount of excuses could undo what had been done. I'm done, I said quietly, my voice steady but final. I don't want to hear anymore. This marriage is over. The words felt like they were coming from someone else, like they weren't even my own. But they were. I had to say them. I had to walk away. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind the people I thought I knew, the life I thought I had. As I stepped into the cold night air, I felt the weight of it all hit me like a tidal wave. The tears I had been holding back for so long finally began to fall, and I didn't care. I let them fall. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. But it was a new beginning. A painful one, yes, but a new beginning nonetheless. I don't know how long I stood outside, letting the cold air hit my face, numbing the ache in my chest. Everything was still spinning the events of the night, replaying in my mind over and over again, like a movie I couldn't turn off. I tried to walk, tried to put one foot in front of the other, but my legs felt heavy, like they were dragging me down. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. I kept asking myself, how could Lisa do this? How could Richard, someone I had trusted, betray me like this? How could everything fall apart so fast? The cold air did nothing to numb the pain in my chest. In fact, it only made it worse. The deep, gnawing pain of betrayal. And it was a feeling I wouldn't wish on anyone. But here I was, drowning in it, unable to escape. I walked for what felt like hours, but I didn't care. I needed to get away, to put as much distance between myself and the life I'd known. The reality of it all started to settle in. It wasn't just that Lisa had cheated on me. It was the fact that she had been planning it, hiding it from me, pretending everything was fine. I had been a fool. I had trusted her with everything, with my heart, my future, my life, and she had betrayed me. And Richard was no better. He had been there all along, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He had seen me as a target, a man who was too focused on his work, too distracted by everything else to see what was happening right under my nose. I had let him in. I had trusted him, thinking we were friends, and he had taken advantage of that trust. But I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to let them both destroy me. I didn't know how I was going to move forward. I didn't know how I could ever trust anyone again. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this be the end of me. I had to figure out what came next. I had to rebuild. The night was silent except for the occasional sound of cars passing by. The world seemed so still, but inside everything was chaos. My mind, my heart, everything felt broken. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to keep moving. To get away from the party, from Lisa, from Richard, from everything that had shattered. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't face them again. Not like this. It was funny in a way. Life had a way of throwing curveballs at you when you least expected it. I had thought I had everything under control. I had thought my life was perfect, my career, my marriage. But all it took was one night, one conversation, one betrayal, to tear it all apart. I thought back to when I first met Lisa, back to when everything had seemed so simple, so pure. We had been young, full of dreams, full of love. I had fallen for her in an instant. And now, looking back, I could see the cracks. The moments where I had failed to see the signs, where I had failed to realize that something wasn't right. But it didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was moving forward, figuring out how to pick up the pieces of my life. I stopped walking for a moment, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I leaned against a lamppost, trying to gather my thoughts. I was exhausted physically and emotionally, but I knew I couldn't keep running. I had to face the truth. I had to confront what had happened. I turned back, my feet leading me toward my car. The drive home was a blur. My mind was still reeling, but I couldn't stop now. I couldn't let myself fall apart. I had to keep going. When I arrived at home, I didn't go inside immediately. I sat in my car, staring at the front door, wondering what I would say to Lisa when I walked in. I knew it couldn't be easy. The conversation was going to be hard, but I needed answers. I needed to know why she had done this, why she had betrayed me like this. I took a deep breath and finally opened the car door. The cold air hit me again, but this time it felt different. It didn't sting as much. Maybe it was because I had made up my mind. I had come to a decision whether I was ready for it or not. I walked to the door, my heart pounding, my mind racing. When I opened it, I was met with silence. Lisa wasn't in the living room. I didn't hear the usual sounds of her moving about, cooking, or talking on the phone. The house felt empty. I walked upstairs, my footsteps heavy on the floor. I reached our bedroom, but the door was closed. For a moment, I hesitated. What would I say to her? How would I confront her after everything? I knocked softly, but there was no answer. My hand trembled as I turned the knob and pushed the door open. She was sitting on the bed, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with sobs. The sight of her like that almost made me hesitate, but then I remembered what had happened. I remembered the lies, the betrayal. I stepped into the room, shutting the door softly behind me. Lisa, I said, my voice steady but filled with pain. We need to talk. She looked up at me, her eyes red from crying. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I shook my head, the words caught in my throat. Sorry? Is that all you have to say? After everything you've done? I never meant for any of this to happen, she said, her voice pleading. I don't know what went wrong. I just felt so lost, and Richard, he made me feel like I was seen again, like I mattered. I wanted to scream, to shout at her for the way she had betrayed me, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the pain in her eyes, maybe it was the exhaustion in my own. I didn't know. Or all I knew was that I couldn't keep going in circles. This is it, I said quietly. This is the end. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. Her eyes widened and she reached out for me, but I stepped back away from her touch. No, Lisa, I can't be the fool anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace. It wasn't the peace I wanted, but it was the peace I needed. I had made a decision. I had to move on. For my own sanity, for my own happiness. I turned toward the door, my heart heavy but resolute. Goodbye, Lisa. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was alone. The quiet in the house was deafening, so much louder than the parties or the chaos I just left behind. I could still hear Lisa's pleading voice echoing in my mind, but I forced myself to shut it out. I didn't need to hear it anymore. I had heard all I needed to hear, and the hardest part was finally over. Or so I thought. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept returning to the same question. What now? I had spent years building this life, this marriage, and now it was all gone, destroyed by one moment, by one choice, by the very people I had trusted the most. I tried to distract myself. I went to the gym, did some work around the house, but nothing helped. The emptiness in me didn't fade. It lingered, gnawing at me. I couldn't shake the weight of it. I felt like I was walking through life in a fog, everything moving around me, but none of it really touching me. I spent a lot of time at my favorite cafe, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, staring out at the people going about their lives. I envied them. I envied the way they could move on with such ease, like they didn't have the weight of the world crushing down on them. But I wasn't one of them. I couldn't move on that easily. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. The hardest part was the silence. The empty space in our bed where Lisa had once been, the ghost of her presence still hanging in the air. I kept thinking I'd hear the sound of her footsteps or catch the scent of her perfume. But it was gone. Everything was gone. And yet, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, I could salvage something from all of this. Maybe it wasn't over. Maybe it didn't have to be the end. But as the days dragged on, I started to accept the reality of it all. The truth was, it was over. There was no going back from what Lisa had done. There was no going back from the lies, the betrayal, the broken trust. I had to let it go. And that's when I started to realize something important. It wasn't just about Lisa. It was about me. It was about taking back control of my life, about finding my own happiness again. I had spent so much of my life trying to be what everyone else wanted me to be. I had tried to be the perfect husband, the perfect provider, the perfect everything. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten who I was outside of my marriage, or outside of the role I'd been playing. It wasn't until the pain of the betrayal began to subside that I realized something crucial. I didn't need Lisa. I didn't need Richard. I didn't need anyone to validate me. I just needed to find my own way again. It wasn't easy. It took time. There were moments when I felt weak, when I wanted to fall back into old habits, to try to fix things that were broken. But I knew I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't keep chasing something that wasn't real. The healing process wasn't linear. Some days were better than others. I would find myself laughing at a joke, enjoying a meal, feeling a glimmer of hope. Other days, it would feel like I was drowning in a sea of memories. The good ones, the bad ones. But each day I was getting closer to finding myself again, closer to rebuilding who I was before all this. I started spending more time with friends, reconnecting with people I had neglected over the years. I went out, took short trips, and just lived. I didn't have all the answers, I didn't have a grand plan, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let this betrayal take away my future. And then, just when I thought I had finally found a semblance of peace, Richard showed up at my door. It was early one evening when I heard the knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. My first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend I wasn't home. But then I heard his voice. "Hey, man, we need to talk." I froze. It had been days since I'd last seen him. Days since everything had gone down. My heart started racing, and before I could stop myself, I found myself opening the door. "Richard," I said, my voice tight, cautious. "What do you want?" He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I know you're angry, I know you're hurt, but you need to hear me out." I didn't know what to expect. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face. I wanted to tell him to get lost, to never show his face around me again. But something told me I had to hear him out. I had to know what he had to say. "I'm listening," I said, my voice colder than I intended. He took a deep breath, as if preparing for the hardest thing he would ever say. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "I'm sorry for everything, for the way I've hurt you, for the way I hurt Lisa. I never meant for things to go this far. I was just trying to fill a void. I didn't think it would destroy everything." I looked at him, my anger rising again. "You didn't think? You didn't think about the damage you were doing? The destruction you were causing?" Richard's face fell. "No, I didn't. And I can't undo what I've done. I can't fix this. I know that. But I need you to know I regret it. I really do." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and thick. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that his apology didn't mean anything, that nothing he could say would change what had happened. But instead, I just stood there, frozen in the moment. After a long silence, I finally spoke, my voice softer than I expected. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Richard. You've taken everything from me. You've broken something that can't be fixed." He nodded, as if he had already known the answer. "I understand, and I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone now." And with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I stood there for a long time after he left, staring out into the darkness. Part of me felt a sense of relief, like I had closed a chapter I never wanted to read again. But another part of me, that part still felt the sting of betrayal. It would take time to heal. It would take time to move on. But I knew one thing for sure. I was going to be okay. I had survived the worst thing I could imagine, and now I was free. Free to start over. Free to rebuild. The days that followed were filled with an eerie calm. I went through the motions, pretending everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. I threw myself into work, into rebuilding the fragments of my life. But the quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts were the hardest. That's when everything hit hardest. That's when the betrayal, the heartbreak, would sink in all over again. I kept asking myself, why? Why had Lisa done it? Why had she let it get this far? The unanswered questions circled in my mind like vultures, waiting to pick at my sanity. But as much as I wanted the answers, I knew I would never get them. The truth had already come out, in the worst way possible, and there was no going back. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her or Richard destroy me. I wasn't going to give them that power. I had spent so many years defining myself by my marriage, by my role as her husband, that I had lost sight of who I was outside of it. I'd forgotten about me, the person I used to be before all of this. The first few weeks after the confrontation were the hardest. There was a part of me that wanted to call Lisa, wanted to talk things through. I thought about the life we'd built, the years we'd spent together. But I knew that was a fantasy. The woman I had married, the one I thought I knew, was gone. The woman who had betrayed me was still there, standing in the wreckage of everything we once had. I had to accept that. I remember one evening when the house felt especially empty. It was just me, the silence, and the memories of everything that had been. I sat on the couch, staring at the pictures on the wall. We had so many pictures together, family vacations, anniversaries, birthdays. All of them now felt like lies. All of them now felt like ghosts. It was then that I realized something important. I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to a version of Lisa that no longer existed. And I couldn't keep holding on to the marriage that was now shattered beyond repair. I had to let go. I had to move on. It wasn't easy. Every part of me screamed to fight for her, to fix things, to find some way to get back to the life we had before. But I knew that was a fantasy. It was the illusion of what could be been, not what was. I reached out to a few close friends after that, those I'd lost touch with over the years. I needed support. I needed to rebuild my connections with people who actually cared about me, not the version of me that was trapped in a marriage I thought was solid. One evening, a friend of mine, Tony, she called me up. He was someone I hadn't talked to in ages, but when he found out what had happened, he insisted on meeting. We sat at a bar, the dim light casting long shadows over the room. The conversation started off slow, with Tony giving me the space I needed to talk. I can't believe it, I said, my voice heavy, with the weight of everything that had happened. I never thought she would do this. I never thought it would end like this. Tony took a sip of his drink before responding. Man, betrayal is one of the hardest things to get over. But you're doing the right thing by letting it go. You deserve more than that. More than a woman who would cheat on you, especially with a guy you thought was your friend. His words hit harder than I expected. They were simple, yet they carried the truth I'd been avoiding. I had been holding on to a fantasy, a version of Lisa that didn't exist anymore. But Tony was right. I deserved more than that. I deserved someone who valued me, who respected me, who was willing to fight for what we had. And if Lisa wasn't that person, then it was time to move on. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into healing. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I wanted to give up, when the pain felt too heavy. But each day I took small steps. I spent time with people who made me feel whole again. I worked on myself, focused on my career, and slowly started to build a new routine. And then, something surprising happened. I started dating again. At first, I didn't think I could do it. I thought I would always be stuck in the past, stuck in the shadow of what Lisa had done. The more I forced myself to move forward, the more I realized something. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was stronger, I was wiser, and I was ready to find someone who truly saw me, not the broken man left in the wake of a betrayal, but the man who was learning to heal, to grow, to love himself again. The first date was awkward, sure. It was with someone I had met through mutual friends, someone who was kind, easy to talk to, and had a smile that reminded me that life could be beautiful. It wasn't a fairy tale, and it wasn't perfect, but it felt like a small victory, like a glimpse of a future I hadn't been able to imagine just weeks earlier. Over time, I started to feel like myself again. I stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped second-guessing everything. The weight of the betrayal didn't disappear overnight. Yeah, but it became more manageable. I still thought about Lisa from time to time. The memories were there, lurking in the corners of my mind, but they didn't hurt as much anymore. They were just memories. And I realized that I didn't need them to define who I was. Months went by. My new life, my new path, became clearer with every step I took. I had made it through the hardest part, and now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for me. One evening, as I sat on the porch, looking out at the sunset, I realized that this was what freedom felt like. It wasn't the absence of pain or the erasure of the past. It was the ability to move forward despite it. It was the knowledge that I could rebuild, that I could start fresh, and that I had the power to choose my own future. I didn't need Lisa's apology. I didn't need Richard's regrets. What I needed was to reclaim my life. And that's exactly what I was doing. It was over, but I was just beginning.